Today we begin Bruce Lee season on the Collector's Cut, kicking off with his first starring movie role in 1971's The Big Boss. We've not really done a season of martial arts films before, so what better way to start than with the most iconic star that the genre's ever had. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
There's no money in ice, but dope, there's plenty.
This is a movie podcast, and we are starting off Bruce Lee season here. We got 5 weeks of Bruce Lee movies, kind of the more prominent 5 movies of his career, starting today with The Big Boss and ending with Game of Death in about 5 weeks' time. Well, 4 weeks' time, I guess, now from time this goes out, but you know what I mean. So yeah, we'll go through Fist of Fury, Way of the Dragon, Enter the Dragon, and ending on Game of Death. But today we start off with 1971's The Big Boss. So yeah, we'll get into it. We'll start spoiler free, of course, as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we go into the spoilers. And if you are enjoying the show, please do hit the like button on YouTube. It helps us out a bunch if you do. And if you want more stuff from us, you can support us over at Patreon. But I'll tell you more about the bonus shows and what you can get over there at the end of the episode. So, yeah, I had seen Enter the Dragon. Like, I think a lot of people have seen Enter the Dragon and have not delved into the rest of Bruce Lee's bigger movies. So I was excited to do this, but where do you stand on your Bruce Lee knowledge?
Pretty much the same. Enter the Dragon is much more of a distant memory for me. It was on in my house every once in a while back when I was like under 10 years old. And so I barely have any sort of real memory of it. But yeah, I definitely haven't seen any of the other ones besides that.
Yeah, so I wasn't really sure what to expect here other than just martial arts movie. Like that's all I really went in knowing. For just the record here, we both watched the dubbed version, which is a little out of character for me. Basically, just the 4K versions that I bought a while ago were just happened to be dubbed. So that's how I watched it. And David just matched up so that we were talking about the same dialogue.
Yeah, pretty much. There's a few. I started watching the original version, and then I noticed that the subtitles were talking about things that when I switched over to the dub version just to compare, it was way off. Like the dub took some liberties there. So I know a couple things about the sub that I do kind of want to mention, but beyond that, it's almost all going to be the dub.
No, I mean, that's pretty common for sub versus dub, and it's one of the reasons why I typically, other than just the lip sync, would prefer to go with subtitled when it's the option. But, I mean, if there's one genre of movie from a foreign country that I might be okay with the dub, it's martial arts movies, because it's kind of one of the staples of, like, when people think about martial arts movies from various parts of Asia, you think of the dubbing.
But no, just on that topic of thinking about kung fu movies like that, I agree, and I kind of compare it the same way of like spaghetti westerns, like all those Italian directors coming in and saying like, this is what westerns were. Well,
with those you have no choice, because with a lot of Italian movies from that era, they would literally just let actors speak whatever language they want when they were shooting, regardless if it matched what the final language was supposed to be. So no matter what you're watching, half the people are badly dubbed. You just have to live with it.
Yeah, no, I'm not even specifically talking about the dub so much as I am just like the style, the feel to it. Like there's westerns that are actually aiming to be a representation of the West, and then there's these.
As I die. On you go.
I was going to say, should I be vamping? Should I be trying to cover?
Yes,
but no, just the idea of the like overall, I don't want to say zaniness of it, because zany makes it sound like it's a goofy thing, but I guess it kind of is. It's just like the colorfulness of the way they represent the West.
It's a little. Oh, I thought we were talking about this, but yeah, like this is definitely a little cheesy. There's definitely some cheesy elements and moments and stuff that feels of its era for sure.
Every once in a while, they do that thing that you recognize from kung fu movies where like very quickly zooms in on somebody's face, and like I'd say 70% of the time it is used in a fight scene to represent like action, but every once in a while it's used for like a boss telling his workers to get back to work, and it just feels so strangely out of place because of it.
Not the big boss though, just the boss.
No, not the boss, the floor manager, the foreman.
I mean, he is a boss, he's just not the big boss.
I going into this, I thought for sure that Bruce Lee was the big boss. I thought that was
Oh,
going to be
really?
like his nickname, or like, you know, we were going to get to know him as like, yeah, that's the big boss, is like a term of respect. But no, about like 30 minutes
No,
in,
it's the villain.
no,
The
that guy's the big boss
yeah,
over there.
the villain's the big boss. He's the one that needs to be taken down. You know, he's the like a video game, the final boss. Like you have to
Yeah.
take him down, that kind of thing. Not that that's the frame of reference they were using in 1971.
You know, like a video game. Pong.
So yeah, I mean the basic premise of this is fairly straightforward. Bruce Lee's character, Cheng-Cho-an, although I'll probably just refer to him as Bruce Lee for the rest of this review. He arrives in a new town with his uncle to sort of live with some of his cousins and get a job, start a new life. There's like a minor implication that he's maybe getting into trouble for fighting in the past. You know, his uncle says, "Hey, no fighting. You made a vow to not fight anymore." So there's that. And then this man is repeatedly tempted and given good reasons to fight over and over again. And ultimately there's a plot about a corrupt boss who's making some workers disappear, and vengeance even, must be dished out. And there you go. That's all I'll say for plot until we get spoilers.
That's fair. I won't go too much deeper on that, but I will say that's one of the small things in this difference between dub and sub that I found to be the most annoying, and kind of just leads right into it, is the music in the dub is so eclectic. It's not bad. It's not like a horrible, awful musical choice most of the time, but in the original sub, because I checked this at the weirder moments, the original sub, it's got a continuous score. It's got like, you know, it's got a vibe it's going for, and it works the whole way through. This one, the score will stop and start on a dime, and it will shift over to this other completely separate song and then shift right back. And the one that gets me is whenever he's remembering that he made a vow not to fight, he's got this little amulet around his neck, and he holds it, and this little like piano score plays for maybe like 3 seconds, but he always does it right in the middle of a fight. So you get this like action fight music, soft piano score, and then action fight music. And it's so completely missing the point of the mood of that.
What's so funny is I didn't realize the music was different in the two tracks, and I was actually kind of digging the music in this. I'm actually kind of curious to hear how different the original audio track is.
It's
now.
a lot more consistent. Don't get me wrong. I like the style that this one goes for, but it's the stopping and starting that gets me. Like, it's so much of just like, and that scene's done. Stop it quick. Fade out.
I was kind of digging it, but admittedly, it was kind of adding into the charm of like the kind of kitsch kind of, or the kitsch kind of vibe of the whole thing. I mean, maybe the original subtitled version is easier to take a lot more seriously, but I think inherently, I mean, like there is straight up a fight scene at one point in this movie when someone goes through a wooden wall, and the cartoon shape of a man is just left in the wall perfectly, and it's like, okay, there's only so serious I can take a movie that's going to do the cartoon cutout of a man in a wall.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I glanced away from the screen at the moment where he went through. So later on in the fight, I see the cartoon cutout hole, and I'm like, how in the hell did that happen?
Physics was defied. That's how that happened. And what gets me is that it's like you can see like the wooden like planks that make up the wall, and somehow they've been perfectly cut like through, like so like the arm of the hole is like going through multiple slates of wood, and I'm like, how would the rest of the wood not all like sort of bend, or like, you know, like
look. There are a couple things in this movie where you just have to accept that everyone who knows kung fu, or whatever the style that's used here is, has some low-level superpowers going on. Most of the time, it's high jumping, because boy, oh boy, do they love to jump over like 10-foot tall objects.
Yes, there's some serious. The first thing we see Bruce Lee do, it's impressive, is a big jump. So yes, there's jumping to be had. Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll just get to the basic impressions then. David, what did you think of The Big Boss?
I enjoyed it. I think that it is definitely, as you said, very kitschy. It's very hard to take serious at points. I will say, if I'm trying to view this from a strictly quality of the movie aspect of things, setting aside the fun of it, I think the plot is a little bit all over the place. The gist of what actually needs to be done and the way they set it up probably could have been done in about like 30 minutes, but instead it's stretched out to an hour and 40 because they introduce a whole bunch of different subplots that ultimately feel like they're not really much of anything in the end. But if I'm looking at this as I'm supposed to, which is fun kung fu movie, it's everything I want it to be. There's plenty of moments where it kind of gets just to I wouldn't say a stupid point, but just a laughably awkward point. And it's just kind of fun to enjoy that as it's happening. And then add on top of it, I think that most of the kung fu is, I put it like a 7 or an 8 in terms of like fight scenes I've seen around this era. But that final fight scene between the final two characters, that one was top tier. I really enjoyed the effort they went into that. Sometimes the editing lets it down a little bit, and that's just all throughout the movie. But for the most part, it really holds up.
Also, the cartoonishly like bright blood, like it looks like paint.
Oh my god, used. It is paint. There's no way it's not. It's brighter than some people's just like dyed red shirts.
Yes, it's definitely a problem that I see in a lot of horror movies from the 70s and 60s. Is they just hadn't quite perfected how to, or maybe it's not even so much that they couldn't. It's more just that we have to make it look really fake or it's too violent looking. It has to be clearly fictional. But thankfully that went away in time. But it definitely stuck out to me because I wasn't sure like how violent the actual fighting would be, in the sense that I was thinking I'll just be punches and kicks and like acrobatics. I wasn't necessarily expecting people to get stabbed and stuff like that, but they do. So you see blood and you see blood gushing out of places, and it's just really fake looking, and it's just kind of what it is. Yeah, I had a good time. I think for what it is and what it's trying to be, I think it's entertaining. It's very endearing at points. Like there's almost like a running thing in the movie where Bruce Lee's character, while he's obviously super confident and a great fighter, he's actually a little shy boy whenever a woman looks at him, and that kind of running little thing I thought was very charming. So like I like details like that. I love the teasing and the build up of like he's not allowed to fight, he's made a vow not to fight, and they milk that for the first like half of the movie, where every time something gives him a good reason to, where it would be just, where no one would blame him for stepping in and fighting, he holds that amulet in his hand and he's like, no, I've made a solemn vow, I cannot do that. But like he almost does it, and he's like, oh, is this, and it just edges you for like half the movie until he's finally ready to like go in. The plot does take a couple of weird like stall turns, maybe in the middle or just past the middle, that I thought were a little bit strange, but for the most part I had a good time. I don't think it's too overly long, as much as I agree that you could have tightened it up a bit more. For sure you could have. 100 minutes is perfectly reasonable. It's not like some super long epic or anything like that it tries to be like punched way too above its weight. So I like it. I think the villain's decent, not the best villain ever, but decent enough, and just how kind of like just slimy, I guess. More than super evil. But
yeah, I think the character is good in terms of making sure that you hate him, but I think there's just a problem over the course of the movie of escalation. Yes. Because at the beginning of the movie, there's a reason to dislike him, and at the end of the movie, they have a very big reason to dislike him. But for the entire middle bit, it kind of just stays flat, and it, like you said, the plot kind of just goes off in a different direction for a while, and then comes back to it towards the end.
Almost to the point where the characters for a couple of scenes forget why they were doing something in the first place, until someone reminds them, and then they go, oh yeah, that's what we cared about, we should go back to that. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking, movie. So I'm glad you pivoted back, but it was kind of weird that you forgot about it for a minute there.
I kind of want to see the cut of this movie where the characters just consistently keep forgetting what it is they're doing, and by the end of it we end up with like just some like managerial office workplace drama.
Yeah, I think, watching this, it is clear why Bruce Lee is the leading man, because he has this charisma and this sort of way that he'll just react to things or smile at things before he even talks. Like, I'm not even talking about him like speaking. Just the way he kind of like acts in a scene, he clearly is a movie star. Versus everyone else who's fine, but they're bit part players. They're there to play the villains or the henchmen or the friends or whoever. He stands out in every scene he's in, even when it doesn't feel like the scene's focusing on him. And it's like, okay, there's a reason why this guy was very quickly being, because Enter the Dragon's only like 2 or 3 years after this. It did not take long. It's a very short span of time between this and the rest of these movies that we're going to be doing.
I will say he did have a very, I don't know about long, but he did have his entire period of Green Hornet before
Yeah,
that.
of course, yeah.
So
And he
that
had
was,
lots of small roles in movies as well. But when you talk about his starring movie roles,
right.
we're kind of looking at those ones for the most part. So
Yep.
yeah.
So just something I noticed that you were saying earlier on talking about video game bosses, according to Wikipedia, so whatever, and also linking to an article by Kotaku, turns out that as far back as they can find, this is where the term boss originates as like the final big bad. It started in
Really?
this sort of movie and then just kind of adapted over to there.
That's interesting. It's funny that we're possibly discovering that this might be the origin of the final boss. Not that they say that phrase exactly, but the idea of calling the villain the boss. Even though in the context of this movie it makes sense because he is literally their boss.
Yeah.
But I just last night I watched a movie where I'm pretty sure I saw the origin of something that I didn't realize had a specific origin. I didn't realize it came from one specific movie, but I was watching a movie where a cop was just 2 days from retirement, and it's actually called out. The character says with a straight face after his death, he was just 2 days from retirement, and I went, is this the one that they're all referencing? Is this what Last Action Hero was making fun of when they said that? It's this movie?
That's fantastic. Which movie was it?
To Live and Die in L.A.,
Okay.
which is a William Friedkin movie. It's pretty solid, but and it's a very taking itself seriously movie. But I'm like, geez, I did not realize that this was like one movie directly inspired that joke, that meme. Before we even knew what a meme was, that was a meme in movies. Was the 2 days from retirement on the police force?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's I guess at that point it's just kind of like like lampshade hanging as a trope, just the thing of like saying, oh, here's the thing that shows up in a bunch of other movies of this style. I guess you could kind of call that a meme, but it is very different.
I mean, I think that one's a meme. It became a meme.
Yeah.
And even if it wasn't technically a meme until the internet, it definitely was one once the internet came along. So
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So here we are. Anyway, so yeah, movie's pretty solid, right? Maybe it could be tightened up a little bit. It maybe suffers, and maybe this is a difference between the dub and the sub, but I do feel like, at least in the dub, like a lot of the characters in the first half are so nice to each other that it's almost unrealistic just how nice, like, Bruce Lee's cousin is to him and everyone else around him. They're all like, oh, you'll do great here at this job. Yes, he's got that vibe to it where everyone's like super cheery and happy for everyone.
Right. Yeah, that's not really a difference as far as that's all. Because here's what I was doing. I don't know if you would count this as like comparing the two, but what I was doing was I was watching the dub version, but I had on the subtitles, and the subtitles were translating whatever the actual original dub was.
Well, yeah, but you just keep in mind though, David, that when they're translating for the subtitles, they're also making changes so it's something you can read in the right amount of time. So it's even that's not 100% one for one accurate, just to be clear.
I'm not going to claim I know what is being said in Cantonese or Mandarin or whatever Chinese dialect this is, but according to the subtitles, they were always that nice. They were always like, "Oh yeah, come on in. You're our cousin. Everything's great."
Yeah, because that was the one thing that was sticking out to me. Was like how nice everyone is, and obviously eventually those villains doing bad things, but even they're pretending to be nice most of the time. Right. So everyone's very happy for a lot of this movie. So yeah, I mean, as far as anything else before we get into spoilers, I guess we kind of touched on the fight scenes a little bit. I think they're fun. They're definitely of the time. They definitely have a bit of a like an old school movie vibe to them where it's like, okay, they're clearly not really hitting each other. And obviously that's still technically true now, but like it looks more effective now than it used to.
Yeah, there's a few times, it's most notable I think in the final fight scene, but there's a few times throughout where there is I don't know if it's a pickup shot or I don't know if the editor just didn't have enough to work with, but there are some very clear editing faux pas that either interrupt the flow of the fight scene a little bit or mess with the geography. I don't know a better way to explain it than that, but there's a few bits of editing during the fight scenes that really stop things and make you go, wait, hold on, what just happened?
it kind of all falls under the umbrella of just editing continuity, I guess, more than anything. But you're right, yeah. And sometimes it's like, are they trying to like give you a jolt to add to the fight intentionally, or are they just covering something up because they didn't have a good, shot that linked the two together, so it just jumps ahead a little bit or something.
Right. There's a few times I noticed they tried to do a match cut where you say occasionally they use blades and stuff. I've noticed like, the blade hits somebody and then they try to keep everybody perfectly still. And then all of a sudden there's that bright red blood wherever the blade landed. And sometimes it works. A lot of times it didn't.
This is the sort of thing that's very endearing. Like if a movie did that now, unless it was trying to be like a really old school, like stylized thing, I would critique it. I would say that's a stupid. Why are you doing that? But in the context of what this movie is and when it came from, I'm like, oh, it's kind of charming that this was what they were trying. I mean, even the opening title screen I thought was charming because
I loved it
because it's literally one JPEG of Bruce Lee doing a kick. It's the exact same one where they've cut around him. And what I thought was so charming about it, not only did they keep using the same one over and over again and just like change colors and like duplicate it and stuff, right? Is that the way they cut around him. Now, obviously at the time it had been a physical thing they did with scissors, but I noticed how imperfect it was because do you know whenever I'm doing the thumbnails, right? Every so often there'll be a moment. It's particularly bad on Tim, but it'll sometimes happen with you where you'll have a bit of hair that's kind of fair and you can kind of see through it, and it's like, well, what do I do? Do I trim all that hair off, or do I sort of leave it awkwardly with a little bit of background so you can still see the hair? This Bruce Lee cutout had that problem where there was a little tuft of hair where you could see the background of whatever they've taken this photograph, and it was left in the image, and it looks really sloppy, but in a really endearing way where I'm like, well, this is like, they were doing this physically with bits of card and shit. Like,
I'm looking at exactly what it is, and I can tell that they started at like his inner waist, made their way around, and by the time they reached the top of his hair where it's all floofy and going straight up, they're just like, screw it. Solid line, whatever.
And it's just the physical version of what I have to do in Photoshop on a weekly basis. So I got a chuckle out of that.
No, I was shocked with how energetic these opening titles were, because I always associate early 70s and like late 60s with either like incredibly well made title sequences where they go all out on like the geometric patterns and stuff, or the laziest possible ones where it's just like, here's the title, here's a few little extra things, there you go. This one, it seems low budget enough that it should have gone with the lazy side, but they really went all out with it. So I'm actually very impressed by that.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's like you couldn't have cut out a few different poses of Bruce Lee. Like just the one over and over again did make me laugh.
I guarantee you that the title guys were given a bunch of like production stills, and that was the only one that was like, well, this is the only action one. Everyone else is just standing around eating rice and talking about managerial stuff.
Oh, dear. All right, are we ready for spoilers? Ready to dive in?
Yeah, I'd say so. I don't really have anything else to add to that.
Yeah, I think so. So spoilers for The Big Boss. You have been warned. Not that it's like a movie with a big plot that's going to do any shocking twists or turns. It's fairly predictable, all things considered.
I'd say there is one that caught me off guard. One that I didn't see coming, but everything else, pretty much.
So I was just saying that up front, just in case anyone wants to just listen anyway or whatever. So yeah, like we said, Bruce Lee arrives at this town, possibly island. I don't know if they ever actually said it was an island, but he arrives by boat.
According to Wikipedia, he came from mainland China and he is now in Thailand.
Oh, okay, all right. Actually, that looks right to me. Now you're saying this is Thailand. I'm like, you know what? I don't know what about it feels like Thailand to me because I'm no expert, but it does feel like Thailand. It's just like
a bit more tropical feeling.
Yes, it's a bit more tropical. That's maybe where you put it, yeah. Anyway, so immediately the uncle's like, now, you're going to have a good life here. You're going to meet your cousins, and you've promised not to fight ever again, right? And I'm like, whoa, don't start my kung fu movie by telling me the main character's never going to fight again. But it's genius, though, because you're waiting until something breaks him, something makes him. Because the first thing that happens in this movie is they're walking along, right? They're chatting away, and he notices a stall, right? This woman's got a stall serving some cold drink of some kind. And he's like, hey, let's go sit down and have something nice and cold to drink. It's hot. And they sit down and they say, hey, we'll have two, please, nice and cold. And she's like, yes, very nice. And it's all fine and well that they're enjoying their drink. It's fine, it's whatever. And then this group of thugs, right? spot this little stall and decide to come over and harass this woman to the point where they're touching her chin and they're saying whatever, and you can just see Bruce Lee sort of looking up like, oh, it's time to intervene. I'm going to protect this woman.
He is already out of his seat, and his uncle's like, dude, I just said.
Yeah, the thing is, though, is that this is an innocent woman's been harassed, so I'm like, Uncle, you're the villain of this movie right now because you're impeding the justice that is supposed to be happening. And the weird thing about it is that the random stranger who comes up, and admittedly, there's a whole bit with the kid first, where the kid like has some rice cakes and the guys steal them.
I cannot begin to get in the mindset of this kid where he sees this woman getting harassed and says, that seems like the perfect customer for my rice cakes.
So these bad guys like take his rice cakes and then don't pay the kid for them. He's like, come on, you need to pay me for the rice cakes. And they just sort of shove him away.
And they kick him while he's down, and then he runs off.
Yeah, and the kid goes to this other guy who turns out to be Bruce Lee's cousin in the movie. And he kicks these guys' asses. And all I could think was, Uncle, you're not going to step in and lecture him for getting into a fight? Like, I don't understand. Why is Bruce Lee not allowed to fight, but his cousin is?
It is explained later on that this little amulet that he has around his neck that they specifically show off is basically the promise given physical form that he made to his mother back home. He told his mother he would not fight when he got to this new place, so that is his promise to her that he's trying to keep. The cousin, however, made no such promises.
No, he did not. Honestly, at this point, I was hoping that the first half of this movie would be a series of increasingly like dire and just incidents where he's seeing someone be attacked, or he's seeing like a child be just like dragged through the street by a monster, and he keeps being like, oh no, this, like, I have to intervene, but I can't, I made a vow, until eventually something, it doesn't quite do that, but I was almost hoping it was going to, based on this scene where he has to resist, he has to be like, no, I can't get involved.
It seems like the cousin's more or less introduced at this point just so it can be like, look, we're not going to let all of these horrible things go unpunished. Someone's going to take care of it. And Bruce Lee's just forced to sit back and watch.
Yes, he's cucked for the first half of this movie.
Pretty much.
Yes. So it's like, and the uncle's like, "Oh, do you know who that is? That's your cousin that just beat up those guys." And then they go over, introduce themselves.
I love the point where they introduce themselves because he literally just got done punching someone like in the back of the head, and then he turns and goes, "Hey, uncle." Like it's he doesn't care that he's in the middle of a fight. He's happy to do it.
So yeah, they go back to where the cousin lives with a mixture of other cousins and just friends. It's a little bit unclear exactly what the ratio is here. The one thing that did get pointed out, though, was that the woman living here who prepares their meals, this young woman who immediately starts making eyes at Bruce Lee, and Bruce Lee's like, sheepishly like looking over and smiling and being like, "Oh, I can't look at you, I'm embarrassed. Oh, a babe's looking at me. Oh, however will I deal with that?" This is unequivocally, they say this multiple times, this is the sister of the main cousin, right, of Tien.
Yes.
And that means that she's also Bruce Lee's cousin, unless I misunderstand how family relations work.
Okay, so we have option A, which is there are some cultural, societal differences when it comes to cousins abroad.
It may be open season. Yeah, you're right. It may be open season.
That's entirely possible.
Yeah.
Option B, though, is that cousin was just the term of familiarity that they used, and in actuality, it's something more like, our fathers both like went to war together, and we are.
That would be fair. Yeah, that would be fine.
So either or, whichever way you want to take it, it's not something that's really leaned on that heavily.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the uncle character's not literally all their uncles. Maybe he's just this sort of old mentor figure who looks out for young people, and they all call him uncle or something or whatever. But
he's gone almost immediately after this scene, though. So
yeah, he has a mule with them, and he's like, "Okay, that's me. I'm off. Have you got Bruce some work?" And they're like, "Yeah, you can come work at the same factory we all do," which will lead to my next question actually quite neatly. Is obviously they're smuggling drugs, right? That we know that, right? That's something that gets brought up. We'll talk about that later. But what is this factory actually supposed to be doing?
They make ice. I don't know how to tell you anything more than that.
Why is, like, I mean, I guess it's just the fake ice they've got, but it looks like every bit of it, these are big, long, sort of coffin-shaped blocks of ice, right? Each one of them have what I can only describe as a white surfboard in the middle of. Like...
Yeah, I mean, when you make ice cubes, there's a little, like, part of it that's clear, and then another part of it that's white. This is just whatever process they make it by, that bit in the middle is that part that's white. And,
okay.
Yeah.
I have a more important question, though. Later on, we see these blocks of ice just hanging out in what's effectively a barn, and they're not melting. So, what sort of super ice are they making here that never melts?
It's the same sort of aspect as, like, a freezer. Like, if you get a whole bunch of ice together, it all collectively, like, stops each other from melting.
Not in this climate, it doesn't.
No, not in this climate, but that's the whole thing. Like, they're not going to be able to ship this very far. This is specifically for, like, the surrounding towns, and then they just send it off that way.
Yeah, but, like, but at that point in the movie, it's been sitting in there all day, and it's all these big coffin-shaped bits of ice have just not melted and budged.
What do you want me to say, Pete? I don't... Look, somehow, in the past, they actually managed to make ice and send it around, like, the country so that people could do this. I'm assuming it looked something like this, but I don't know.
Yeah, but I'm assuming it's at least stored in some sort of freezer.
Yeah, but that's just it. They wouldn't have a freezer, because if they had the ability to make freezers, everyone would just have a freezer.
Look, my question here isn't what happened in the real world if this was a thing. My question is that the movie makers forgot to account for the fact that ice is supposed to melt, and definitely would melt in this tropical climate.
I'll do my Googling if you want to continue, by all means.
I'm not expecting you to have an answer. I'm just expecting you to agree that there's some movie nonsense going on here. That's all.
Say, like 60% of me wants to agree with you there, but the other 40%...
60?
No, the other 40% of me is that when you have stuff like this happen, like a whole bunch of ice all collectively together, it lowers the temperature in the room, and therefore stuff doesn't melt as quickly.
But they're not all sitting together, though, when you see them later on. One's literally sitting against the wall, and it's just not melting.
But they're all in, like, a condensed room together. Like, they're all in... If that room is sealed up enough, then it might not be something where hot air's getting in. I don't know. I'll agree with you on saying that, like, it's a little weird, but again, nothing to do with the story at all.
I cannot believe you said you 60% want to agree with this. This is why your country elected Trump, okay? 60%. You only agree with me 60% that the giant blocks of ice should at least be melting.
I'm trying to Google and get an answer for you right here. Here we go. They would harvest large... This is 1805.
This movie's not a period piece.
I know, but I'm just saying, 1805, how did they manage to keep ice around? They harvested large blocks of ice, and then they packed the ice with sawdust and used salt to keep it from melting.
Okay. I don't remember a lot of salt or sawdust, but if you're telling me that's how they keep it from melting.
There was also, according to this, well-insulated ice houses was the other way that it did it. Basically what I was describing to you.
Okay. It's entirely possible here. I've been on a rant, and this is such an ancient thing to me because it predates any need of my entire life to know about how they kept ice like this around.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought there were giant bits of plastic that they didn't want to bother.
They probably are, because for filming purposes, yes, like that would make total sense.
Yeah, movie lights are hot. Like those movie lights would be melting the shit out of them.
But if we're talking about diegetically in the movie, it might have made sense.
Okay, you've given me a morsel. I still debate a bit if
that's fine.
How they're presented in this movie would actually keep them frozen, especially since it's hardly like we're in Minnesota. You know,
yeah,
like,
absolutely.
If it's winter in Minnesota and you show me giant blocks of ice not melt, and I'm like, well, yeah, duh.
Just want to make it clear to everybody else, ice does not play a point in this plot at all, outside of one reveal.
No, I wasn't even thinking about the ice at all, other than just a sort of passing thought of what the hell are they doing with this ice? Because I assumed they were using it for something, but if they're just making ice, they're just making ice. Yeah. But it was later on when stuff's discovered where they're storing some of these blocks of ice where I went, wait a minute, why are these blocks of ice all just hanging around and not melting?
No, I've got my own problems with that storage method that we're talking about later. We'll get to it, but like that's stupid in its own right for completely separate reasons.
Oh yeah, there's a whole other element we're not talking about, but yes. Anyway, so Bruce Lee is taken to this small factory where they're making giant blocks of ice. They chop them up a bit, whatever, and he's taken to see the manager, who's on a little hut sort of off the side. And the manager's like, "Oh, this is this guy that said you were going to bring to me. Okay, great. You can start soon. Go speak to the foreman." And he's all very happy and smiley. We've also seen the audience. The audience has seen at this point as well, because he sort of just handed off some drugs to like a mule to take away. So we kind of know there's something illegal going on with this factory, even up front. So we already get a sense of that right from the get-go. So,
but before he starts working, we need to see how absolutely goddamn amazing the cousin is to every single person he comes across.
Yes. He's very nice to all the other people he works with. He's very friendly. He introduces Bruce Lee to them all and says, "Hey, this is my cousin. He's going to come work here." And they're all like, "Yeah, high five." Do you know what? I'm realizing that the attitude of the characters in Miami Connection is largely based off the attitude of the characters in this.
You're right. That's yeah.
And that's not to damn this movie. That is just me recognizing that Miami Connection was taking it from somewhere else and being even more absurd with it.
Which really explains why at the end of this movie it said only the eradication of violence.
I mean, it doesn't say that, but it doesn't end in kind of a somber note where it's not like Bruce Lee's character's going to be heralded as a hero for what he's done. It kind of feels like, no, he got angry and he got violent and there's going to be consequences, even though he technically took out a bunch of bad guys.
Look, not to spoil too much of anything, but manslaughter's still a crime. Like, you need to be tried for that.
I was convinced the police didn't even exist in this movie until they show up right at the very end, and I'm like, oh, I guess they do exist. All right.
Man, how much of a twist would it be if we found out at like the very, very end the police were being paid off the whole time, and they just like, oh well, we're throwing the book at you because you just ruined our payday.
So. Anywho, yeah, so he doesn't actually start working that first day. He ends up, he's with the cousin. They're walking home. They have the next fight scenes because they see a woman who's upset and she's outside this gambling den, right? And she's crying her eyes out. And the cousin, Tien, says, "Hey, what's wrong?" To whoever her name is. And she's like, oh, my husband, he's spent all of her rent money. He's gambling. The predators in there.
I will say, at least the way that the dub phrased it was that they don't make enough money to make ends meet, so they have to gamble. Like, that is, I like that more than just, we're irresponsible with our money.
He's got an addiction.
We have to do this or else we do not make rent.
So they go in and get the husband and sort of like pull him away and say, "Hey, no, come on out now." And the people who run this place are not very happy with that. They're not very happy that they've pulled him away.
I mean, not just they pulled him away. Before he pulls him away, he pulls up one of the dice that they're rolling and shows that it's loaded. And he pulls it apart. He's like, "See, they're scamming you." But
I thought it was a domino, not a dice. But either way, you're right. Yeah, he breaks it open and it shows that they're cheating. So they come out looking for a fight, and Bruce Lee still vowed to not fight, of course. So he does jump out the way. Now, he does cheat a little bit because at one point he does do a little double punch with both his hands where he knocks two guys out. But it's like just a little tease. It's like, oh, look how quick he is. You're going to be so excited when he actually fights properly later.
Yeah, it's the thing. Tien is going right. He's got like 6 guys he's fighting. He goes up against all of them. And he's capable, but you can see like he's really trying hard. He's like dodging and ducking and all that stuff. But the 2 guys who are thrown under to Bruce, he barely has to look. He's just boom, boom, done. So you're immediately given that little hint of like, oh, the moment he joins the fight, it's all going down.
Yeah, some more googly eyes between Bruce Lee and Chow Mei is the woman that lives with the cousin who's collecting the eyes for him. Yeah.
Is this the bit? Yeah, he's on his way to work at this point, and
the next morning,
yeah, and some dude is trying to like hit on Chow Mei.
I think that's
she's not having anything of it.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit later, but yeah, I mean, it's just worth bringing up whenever because it turns out to be the son of the big boss who's actually chatting her up. Because it ties into later plots with him, but yeah, he's like, that's the thing. So it cuts to her. She's over at the river, like washing like some clothes or whatever, right? And this guy comes up and he says, "Baby, I'm crazy about you. Let's become friends. Let's go out and get acquainted." And then he says, and I laughed out loud when he said this, he says, "What's your name?" I'm like, well, you just said you're crazy about her. You can't say that if you don't know her name.
Look, things were different back then. You had to lead strong and then get all the details later.
I honestly, and I don't think it was meant to be funny either. I audibly laughed out loud at "What is your name?" like 30 seconds after "I'm crazy about you."
Crazy about you. Let's get acquainted. Let's get to know each other. I want to marry you. What's your name?
I mean, obviously you're a creep who's harassing her, but you're going so deep on just the fact that you think she's physically attractive. Like you're going all the way to the end of the line. I
mean, it's literally no different than like modern day catcalling. It's just hey, baby, come here. What's going on? By the way, who are you?
It's just phrasing more than anything else. But when she sees Bruce Lee, she sort of runs up to him and kind of like hugs him a bit to like say, "Hey, I'm with him. Like, go away." And as soon as the guy leaves, Bruce Lee and her kind of like notice that they both feel awkward that they're holding each other, and they sort of split apart. Like, "Oh no, we just did something illegal. We touched. Oh no."
I love the way Bruce ends the conversation because like they're just looking at each other for a good like 5-10 seconds, and then he's just like, "Well, I got to go to work," and he just walks away.
Yeah, it's very. I mean, this is the stuff that I found very endearing. Was whenever it was like him being awkward around her or around other women later. It always felt like, you know what, it's one thing to say he's a good person and he wants to intervene, but this is the sort of thing that made him feel a bit more human, is that he's actually like not confident with other things. He's really good at fighting, but he's not necessarily this like perfect human. You know, this isn't like Tommy Wiseau, who's just, "Oh, I'm the best at everything. I'm the best employee at the bank. Everyone loves me.
He's my favorite customer."
Favorite customer. So, yeah. So when he's out at work, right? The foreman turns out to be a dick pretty immediately, where he's like, "Get to work," and Bruce Lee quite rightly stands there and is like, "Doing what? Like, you've not told me what to do yet."
I mean, I'll give him just a little bit of like on the foreman's benefit of that. He says like, "Okay, go ahead, get to work," but he just stands there, like he doesn't do anything, including ask what to do. And it's not until the foreman's like, "Why are you standing there? Why aren't you doing something? Go out, do something." He's like, "What?" And he's like, "Oh, move some ice."
See, I found that a likable character trait, because to me, I was
it's likable.
Challenge him, challenge the prick, because he's been an asshole.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. But I'm just saying, like, if you look at it through the foreman's shoes, like, you just told the guy to get to work and he's just standing there, like, staring at you. It's like, what? What do you want from me?
So Bruce Lee's showing off and that he can slide this big block of ice down this ramp all on his own, and he pushes it on his own, but the ramp sort of gives way. The edge of the ramp kind of like breaks.
He's too damn strong.
And the ice falls off, and like half of it, smashes in half, and like, oh, people are freaking out. "Oh, what'd you do? And the foreman's saying, "Oh, you waste ice, you waste our time, you're a bad employee, blah, blah, blah." But of course, the big detail here is that two of the guys who are over near it happen to notice that a bag of drugs falls out, and they go, "What the hell is that?" And this is kind of the inciting incident for the actual plot, which is basically at the end of the workday, these two guys are asked to stay back with the manager, and they go and speak to him, and the manager gives them a pitch. He says, "Hey, this place is actually about drugs. We distribute drugs, and the big boss, he wants to bring you into it because you're two good workers. So here's a bonus for both of you, 1,000 each. Now you're going to be part of this system." And I have to, like, obviously it signs their death warrant, right? But I loved the like just how polite the guy is. He's like, "No, I'm a good boy. We can't be a part of this. We won't tell anyone, but we just don't want to be a part of it."
Yeah.
You know, I was like, you know what? You're coming across really likable, and in 30 seconds when they stab you in the back, I'm going to feel bad for you because you're a good boy.
No, it's because that's the thing. They're all part of that group of cousins or whatever that Bruce has at the house. And they're all waiting for him later. But no, it's absolutely this feeling of, oh, God bless your little heart that you think that's how things work here. I also really like the fact that he opens up with the bonuses first. He's like, "Hey guys, you do such good work. Here's $1,000 each. That's for you. You can have that. By the way, we do dope here. That's what we do."
My favorite part though is the way he phrased the thing at the start though, is he hands them the money and says, he doesn't say "you do such good work here." He says, "I'm sure you do such good work here." He doesn't even know. He's just assuming that they do good work.
I feel like if I spoke the language, that would 100% be the thing where he mispronounces their name.
Oh yeah,
where he's
yeah,
just
sure.
like, oh hey Jim, actually it's Joe, whatever. Here you go.
Hey, but it gets the point across. So whoever translated for the dub, like, yeah,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, good on him. Also, just flashing back a little bit to when Bruce Lee knocks the ice off, we get this one enforcer guy who wears like a tight black shirt and a hat. I mean, I don't know what kind of drugs this guy is on, but the order of events here is Bruce gets down, he takes a look at like where the ice fell off and all that. This guy's standing over to the side. He's like, hey man, I'm really sorry. And this dude reels back and just punches him straight across the face.
Oh, I forgot about this first punch, yeah. Because this is one of the first times I think where the camera goes in close as his head snaps around and it's like, oh, he's about to go nuclear. And he doesn't. Yep. He doesn't. He remembers his emblem. He's like, no, I'm not going to. But it's like, oh, it was almost time.
Everyone else on the crew comes up like, why did you punch him? And I'm sitting there like, yeah, man, why the hell did you punch him?
They all stick up for it. It's actually quite lovable, the way they all come up and stick up for their new cousin Bruce.
Yeah, I think that this movie is almost on the better side of why every workforce should have a union. Because when everyone comes up together, you can't get punched in the face by your manager.
Well, this is the thing. So these two guys leave the manager's little hut, and very quickly the foreman, the enforcer dude, and there's like one other henchman guy. There's like 3 henchmen all in.
Yeah.
Basically come up with blades and very quickly kill these guys, stab them. It's a whole thing, and this almost starts like a funny running thing in the movie. Actually, is because like later we go back to the house and the guys are like, well, it's about to have dinner, but like. The manager wanted to see those two. Should we eat without them? It's like, well, we'll have to, but let's leave them some. Oh, it's like, well, yeah, obviously you'd leave them some. Why would that even be a question? But yeah, so they have dinner, and then the next day they come out to work and they're like, where are those two guys? Like, and so they want to go speak to the manager. They want to ask about it. Yeah. But
before we get too far ahead, I do need to mention that we do have a specific scene right after they're stabbed, showing the disposal of the bodies.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. So because this is an ice cutting place, they've got a whole bunch of very powerful saws. So we see them dragging them up on top of these ramps, turning on the sawmill, and just feeding the bodies through. And it's not gory. It's just a lot of the bright red blood on their shirts as the saw seemingly cuts through them.
And then you don't really quite see the detail of it, but you do see them making more ice, the implication being that they're putting their body parts in these giant blocks of ice like they do the drugs.
Yes, exactly.
So that's
which, again, when we get to it later, I have issues with.
So this becomes like a thing where like hey, what the hell? And obviously it's Tien, the main cousin, who's like where are these two guys? This is bullshit. And this is around here where he casually mentions, yeah, and that other guy went missing recently too. And I'm like, oh, so there was someone already went missing from the group, and this is now number 2 and 3.
Yes, this is something that was, I think, only in the original version. They cut it out of the dub because I noticed it in the subtitles. Back during the beginning scenes where the uncle is talking to the group and all that, in the dub version, he's talking about like, oh, this guy took a new wife and then he got his prostate removed and now he like can't pleasure her or whatever. It's a whole separate conversation. But in the sub version, they talk about a few different people and like where they are now. And this Mr. Wang, the guy who disappeared a month ago, they were like, oh, have you seen Mr. Wang around? And the uncle's like, no, I didn't see him at all back home. So I think that that's kind of an allusion earlier on where they said like, oh, he went back to mainland.
Don't get me wrong, nothing about it's confusing. It's like, okay, so one guy's went missing before. This is like, so they're extra suspicious. It's like, wait, we've just lost 2 more people who've mysteriously just vanished. Where are they? And of course, every time like someone goes to the manager to ask him about it, the manager's like all smiles and, oh, don't worry, the big boss, he's going to look into it. He cares about this personally. So you see, it'll be sorted by Friday. Like, that's the type of response he gives every time. And the movie's kind of about all these characters just sort of slowly losing, like, no, this is bullshit. Like, he's clearly lying to us. Like, we can't believe a word he's saying.
Well, the manager also specifically says for those two, like, oh, yeah, the big boss wanted to see them. They went to his house. They weren't here. Yes. Don't look around here. They went to the big boss's house.
And of course, when he said that, he wasn't planning that Tien would then say, hey, after work, let's go and look to the big guy's house and see if we can find them or find out what happened to them. So Tien goes to the big boss's house with one other guy from the workplace. Yep. And I think before we actually get there, we get introduced to the big boss at his house with basically his son is training with a bunch of other guys. and is only doing okay, so the big boss steps in to show him how it's done. So it's basically just to establish, hey, the bad guy can fight too. He's very good at it. So eventually when it's Bruce Lee versus this guy, it's going to be a mano-a-mano type fight. It's not just going to be Bruce Lee stomping him out like he's nothing.
Yeah. So. This isn't the one that I always think back to, and I'm sure there's much better examples, is the movie Taken, where you have a fight scene between like Liam Neeson and the big muscle guy, but then the final guy is just like an old man who Liam Neeson just immediately like snaps his neck and he's done for.
Yeah, I'm still mad that the second Taken wasn't called Taken 2 The Max.
I'm very sorry.
It upsets me.
I think Taken 3 was where they kind of were just like, this is kind of silly, isn't it?
Yeah, but they should do a fourth one though, because they can call it Taken 4 Granted.
Taken 4, a ride.
But granted, because his daughter keeps getting kidnapped. Like somehow he just keeps taking it for granted that she's safe. So it's a perfect title in more ways.
The second one's his wife, isn't it?
Maybe it is. I don't know. I never saw the second one. I only saw the first one.
That's right.
But I just remember Maggie Grace was meant to be his teenage daughter, even though she'd already been on Lost for years playing like a 25-year-old. So it just felt weird to suddenly pretend she was a teenager. But
yeah.
Anyway, so the other big thing here, just worth mentioning, is that the son goes over to his dad and goes, "Yeah, that was very impressive, Dad. That fighting skills, very, very good. You jumped really effortlessly. By the way, Dad, can I have 10 grand? But I've got a surprise for you in return. I found a woman for you." And it, obviously he's talking about Chow Mei. And I the way he's talking here, I definitely didn't expect that she was going to be into this or want to do this with her consent or anything like that. But I didn't think that he was saying to his dad, "I'm going to straight up kidnap her and like tie her hands together and bring her to you as a gift." I thought it was going to be more, "I'm going to threaten her into coming here and, they'll coerce her in a more, we'll pretend we're not assaulting you," but they are, obviously.
Yeah. Something where it's like, "Oh, hey, your family is in trouble down at the mill. Why don't you come here and we can help them out," or something like that.
Yeah. Something to that effect. Instead, no, they just straight up kidnap her to be used as a slave. That's effectively what happens.
Yeah, mind you, that's
later.
much later in the movie.
That's much later, but this is the first hint that it's going to happen. Right. And of course, it ties that one scene with this guy hitting on her to the main bad guy. So it's like, okay, you can see how these things are going to come together later on. And I think the other surprise about that kidnapping thing is that everything else in this movie, the villains constantly pretend that they're not violent. They constantly smile, they constantly say the right things, say that they're looking into stuff, and then just stab you in the back. I think the fact that this, like, I expected the same kind of pretending to be nice attitude with her, and instead they just no, just kidnap her and like tie her up. Like,
yeah, I mean, maybe you could view that as a little bit of like the way they view different genders or something like that.
Sure,
like, the women, they could just do whatever they want. But yeah, it does kind of just feel like at that point they're like, screw it. We've been through enough of the playing nice.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're not exactly being nice to anyone, but yeah, they won't even pretend to be nice to the women, I guess is the way to look at it. Yeah. So, yeah, sure enough, Chen and his friend come up to the house. The big boss is all nice about it and says, "Yeah, they were here. I gave them some money. I gave them a bonus. They're probably out drinking. They're with women, probably." And
that's just the recurring excuse. They're like, "Yeah, they're out. They're drunk off their ass. That's where they're at. I don't know what to tell you."
And Chen's like, "No, I know those two. They're good boys. They wouldn't do that." And to be fair, we've seen just enough of them to know that, yeah, they are good boys. They probably wouldn't be doing that.
They would absolutely be the type that if given free drugs on the street, they'd say, "No, thank you, sir. And may I help you get off of that smack."
So, of course, as soon as they go to leave, the big boss is like, "We've got a problem. We need to take care of these two."
You say that, but they make it very explicit that there's a problem because Chen literally turns to the big boss and be like, "I bet you killed them. I bet they're dead. How dare you? Actually. I will have you face justice, sir." And big boss is like, "Whoa, that's quite the accusation there. Please leave my house."
Yes, but of course, as soon as they walk out the front door, like the thugs are all waiting to take them. And of course, Chen's been shown to be a decent fighter, so he does put up a fight. He does fight back. His buddy tries as well, but not as much. He obviously dies first. But even to the point where he sort of dies with a knife sticking out of him, being like, "Chen!" And that distracts Chen a little bit, and yeah.
just enough where he gets a knife to the stomach and doused in red paint.
Yes, doused in red paint, of course. So we're now at a point in this movie where now two pairs of characters have mysteriously disappeared as far as like all the main group are concerned.
Which, like, on one hand, you'd think that would up the stakes because of sheer quantity. But on the other hand, they don't care about the first pair of people. As soon as Shen disappears, they're like, well, where's Shen? We got to find out where he is. He's the most important guy in our bunch.
Yeah, there's such a weird progression of events here. Obviously, like, Chow Mei's a little bit worried that her brother's not showing up, and, you know, Bruce Lee kind of acknowledges that. And when they go into work the next day, it's like, okay, let's go and talk to the manager. And they kind of all go and talk. I mean, Bruce Lee sort of leads them up, but they all sort of go up as a group and sort of want to know where he is. And, you know, the manager gives the same bullshit reasons, excuses, whatever. But now they're not quite buying it because, hey, 5 people, they even say, because of that first guy that was, you know, before the start of the movie. It's like, okay, 5 people have now went missing. This is extremely suspect. Maybe we should just refuse to work. Maybe we should, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like, it turns here.
Yeah, the foreman rings the bell, says everyone get back to work, and they're like, no, screw you. We're going to go ahead and keep on sitting here until we get some answers.
Yeah, where's our friends? Give us them back. And of course, and I love the way this scene progresses, because basically, you know, obviously it starts to escalate, there's fighting, sort of breaks out and whatever. And the fact that there's fighting and Bruce Lee's not involved, he's staying out of it, but there's one moment when one of the henchmen just come over and punch him or slap him in the face, and it does that quick zoom into his face where his head snaps around, and he's like, and the music sort of goes, dun, 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 and it's like, yes, it's almost time. And then of course, like the sort of the payoff to it is that when his amulet gets grabbed and smashed on the ground, and he's like, it's almost like the magic spell's been broken, where he's like, the amulet's gone. That means it's time for me to unleash. And he does. Bruce Lee single-handedly kicks the shit out of every one of the henchmen on his own.
I mean, you say that, but first off, I got to go back to the amulet thing, because I love the fact that this deep, solemn promise he made to his mother is only as strong as that amulet is. Like, it doesn't matter the fact that he still remembers the promise. It doesn't matter anything else. The moment that thing shatters, it looks like he's a friggin' Dragon Ball Z character who just had his Saiyan power surpassed, where it's like, okay, now it's time to let off the hook. Secondly, you say that he beats up all of the guys. Yes, to an extent, but there's also only like 5 of them.
Well,
like
at first. But then the bus of the extra henchmen from the big boss show up because they know they need backup because there's too many workers.
Right. And then he starts unloading on them as well. But they eventually just all load back up into the bus before he's beaten all of them up and then drives away. And everyone's like, yeah, Bruce Lee, you're the best. You're the coolest.
Yeah, and Bruce Lee's taken off to the side and told that he is now the new foreman. He's been promoted. And what's so weird about this part of the movie is that everyone who was yelling for justice immediately goes, "Oh my God, that's amazing, Bruce! You're the new foreman!" And they all cheer. They say, "Let's go celebrate!" And there's a great like scene where they're going back to their home and they're doing this like sort of dance walk where Bruce Lee's in front and they're all sort of walking in this rhythm, or maybe he's in the back. But either way, they're doing like a train, where they're just sort of walking in this dancing way. And Chow Mei's sitting on the porch looking at them come in, look like they've just won the Super Bowl or something, where they're so happy. And she's like just sitting there like distraught because her brother's still missing. And they all get up to the porch and they're like, "Hey, it's great news, Chow Mei. Bruce Lee's now the foreman. It's such a great day. We're so happy." And then I was thinking, what, have you guys forgotten that there's like 4 or 5 people missing at this point that could be dead? And then she eventually lets out with, "But have you found my brother?" And they all go quiet and go, "Oh, yeah, we were supposed. Oh, that's what we were supposed to be. That's why we started rioting in the first place. Why did we forget this?"
I love that because it's just like, it makes me think of somebody who, like, you know, they have like a wife or so. They have some sort of relation to a character who has like a terminal illness, like something awful. And in the morning, the character leaves and says, "Don't worry, I'm coming back with a cure." And they go off. And then at the end of the day, the character who has the illness sees them like smiling and striding towards the house. And it's like, "Oh my God, you're happy. Is that good news?" And he's like, "Yep, I got a promotion." It's like, "All right, what about the cure?" And he's like, "Oh, completely forgot. Tomorrow, promise.
Yeah, that's what they basically say. Oh, well, we'll talk to them about this again first thing in the morning. That's basically what they say to her. So, yeah, I mean, I got some good chuckles out of this scene. But relief as well, because I was worried the movie was just kind of ignoring what they cared about like 2 minutes ago.
Right.
So I was happy that they kind of pivoted back on track.
Yes and no for me. See, this is the start of, yes, they pivot back onto track, but for the next like 20 to 30 minutes of this movie, it's kind of just this dance where managerial is basically saying, hey, Bruce, now that you're upper management, you don't got to worry about that sort of stuff. And so they don't actually forward this plot much at all for another like 30 minutes.
No, you're right, but I'm saying all the characters care about it again, right? So while Bruce Lee is invited to dinner and that sends us down a path of events, the rest of the characters then get pissed at him because he's having dinner with the manager instead of getting to the bottom of what they wanted to know. So, you know, like at least the characters are addressing it correctly. And I mean, there is some entertainment to be had here, though, because again, this is where a lot of Bruce Lee's like shyness with women comes back in, is because like, okay, it's the end of the workday, he's been invited to dinner with the manager, and it's a table with food, they're set up, and then the manager just happens to mention, oh, the girls won't mind if we start eating, and Bruce Lee's like, girls? And in walks 3 women, possibly prostitutes from the local brothel, as was the implication I was getting.
I'm just going to throw in this trivia here. They were all real prostitutes, paid to be extras.
Even the one that has like extra scenes later?
I don't know about that one, but the rest of them, yes.
Okay, the rest of them, fair enough. But there's one that actually has lines that interacts with them. Right. I feel like she might have been an actress just because she actually has scenes. But yeah, fair enough. So they said, and there's just all this stuff where they're pouring drinks and Bruce Lee's sort of looking over at her all shy and she's smelling back at him. And it's this idea that he's so shy interacting with a woman that he just accepts all the booze that she keeps pouring him. And he gets drunk to the point where later on he starts breaking like planks of wood, like, you know, martial arts style, while he's pissed to show that he's pissed meaning drunk here for the Americans, because that's how it's used in the UK.
I had no idea what you were talking about.
Yes,
totally
yes.
on that.
He's plastered and he's you know, breaking the planks and everyone's cheering him on, but everyone's having this great time. He's stumbling around, his vision's going hazy, we get the POV shot where everything's going in and out of focus, and he ends up like lying in a bed. And I actually thought the implication at the start of the scene is that he'd already had sex with the woman who was flirting with him.
Yeah.
But instead it feels more like, no, she's taking him back to her place, and then she initiates sex during this scene when he wakes up a little bit.
I will say there's, during that scene where it's getting blurry,
yes,
we see him look over at the prostitute and it fades over to be Chow Mei for a second. So like, obviously he's like, I've got my sights on one woman only. You're probably her. Yeah.
So he I don't want to say he's assaulted, but he definitely, because it's a lapse in judgment while he's drunk, we'll say. But it definitely feels like this woman has been hired to seduce him, to as a reward, say, hey, stick with us, be on our side, and be one of us bad guys, because life can be good. You'll get money, you'll get women, you'll get all these things. So, and then
he's up and out the door almost immediately the next morning, and she's just like, oh, leaving so soon? And he's like, yeah, sorry, bye. And he just bounces as quick as possible.
To be fair, she's a nice enough person about it.
Yeah.
You know, even later on, or another, the other scene she gets, she's, she helps him with information. She gets killed for it, of course, immediately by the bad guys, but
yeah, it happens. One thing I did want to point out, because I noticed this as I was watching this scene academically.
Okay, what did you notice on her boobs? Go on.
Well, when she takes off her top, there's a pattern of like 5 or 6 dots on her chest. And it's not until like 2 or 3 scenes later that we get the explanation for that. But it turns out that these are all like dart marks. And it turns out that the big boss really enjoys using like darts to chastise these prostitutes whenever they step out of line or mess up or anything.
Yeah, we see him mistreating another couple of women, actually. It's when Bruce goes to see him soon enough, because he goes to see him after the next day at work. And this is after like the other guys have been like, oh, you're having dinner with the boss. You have gotten too big. Your ego's too... I'm like, guys, you were literally holding him up on your shoulders and celebrating like he won the big game yesterday. And he gets one little perk one day, and all of a sudden he's an asshole, and he's like out of line. He's left your social class now. Now he's like, because it's like, hey, oh, we can't give you anything to eat because you're used to the finer dining now. You're used to the upper lifestyle.
Yeah,
it's like, oh, all right, guys. Like,
it felt a little bit out of nowhere, but at the same point, I understand that they are all pissed off with the entire situation, and Bruce is literally the only person who's able to really do anything for them right now, and he's just not.
Yes.
He's just like not asking about these things.
Yeah. Oh, not yet, but it's only been one night, to be fair. And Chow Mei is the one person who's still sympathetic and tries to speak to him and whatnot.
Which, credit to her, as he's running out of this brothel, she's the first person that he comes in contact with right outside the door. And she's like, oh, hey, Bruce. And she looks up at the sign and looks back down at him like, oh.
And she wipes away a tear. She wipes away a single tear at the end of the scene.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Little did she know he was kind of tricked into it, but, that's,
He thought it was you, and also he was drunk.
Well, the order of events is important there. He was very, very drunk and then thought it was you.
Yes, there you go.
But yeah, so he talks to the manager again, saying, hey, I need to get to the bottom of this stuff. And he's like, oh, the big boss is going to talk to the police chief. He's a personal friend. It'll be taken care of. So Bruce Lee arranges to go and see the big boss. So Bruce Lee goes to see him, and this is where he witnesses the big boss, who's been very nice to him, but does notably spit on one of the ladies that are there.
Well, also, he has a whole bunch of guard dogs, which, I mean, he doesn't, sick the dogs onto Bruce Lee, but he also takes his sweet-ass time calling them off.
Yes, and Bruce Lee does a lot of jumping to get away from said dogs. But, yeah, so, we're at this point. He tries to talk to the villain. The villain, I don't even remember what the villain says to him here, if I'm honest.
I think it's basically just more of the same stuff. Where he's like, talk to the police, whatever, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, same old, same old. Because, I mean, everything escalates after this point quite quickly because ultimately, I mean, everyone but Bruce Lee and Chow Mei end up dead, right? That's where the back, 20, 30 minutes of this movie go. So, ultimately, Bruce Lee is suspicious of what he's seen. He doesn't really trust that he's hearing the truth from him, obviously, and it leads him to snooping, and that's kind of where things escalate. And he finds the blocks of ice, and not only does he find the blocks of ice with drugs in them, he sees his cousin's body, his head, inside the ice.
Yeah, okay. I'll go ahead and just get that flag back here.
Yes.
What was the plan? What was the plan with the bodies here? It's one thing if you put them in ice in order to make it so, it doesn't smell or anything like that. But it is still ice, and not only that, it's transparent. At least hide the ice, man. And I'm not talking about a back room. I'm talking about, under something, in the ground, anything. I presume they were going to put them somewhere eventually. It's not like they can sell this ice. People are going to notice parts of dead bodies in it. Yeah, no, fair enough. But it's been at least 3 days. We've seen morning, night, morning, night. When were they eventually going to do this?
Maybe they're going to sell some of the human meat off on the black market for the sickos.
I guess.
The cannibals.
It's a weird little section for me where, on the first immediate second of seeing it, I'm like, oh no. And then it clicked in my head of, why is that still here? Why would that be here at all?
I mean, in the movie, contextually, I don't know. But why is it there for the sake of the movie? It's because they wanted this visual of the cousin's head in the ice for the dramatic shock. So
yeah,
that's why they did it. So, I mean, how you feel about it is fair. Yeah, I mean, obviously, some of the henchmen did show up and catch him and say, we had a feeling you'd be snooping around. And it leads us to a very long fight scene where Bruce Lee takes on lots and lots of people. Mostly outside the hut once they get outside. And it's this hut that the person goes through and leaves the human-shaped hole, and very comically so, might I add. But there's a lot of jumping around, a lot of dodging knives. There's him turning knives back onto the bad guys themselves and stabbing them. Lots of jumping, of course, still. My favorite little thing actually is how he at one point he sort of shuffles back, where he kind of, instead of taking steps back, he kind of just sort of shuffles both of his legs back so he can keep his eyes on everyone. Just really simple things like that. I enjoyed.
Yeah, I do wonder. Apparently, very early in production, it was said that because of a stunt gone wrong, he sprained his ankle,
Oh,
and
okay.
so he was unable to do like they had to restructure the schedule and do stuff like that. But I wonder if that might have been one of the times where like he had to just kind of drag his ankle a little bit because he was unable to walk properly.
I mean, it looked very fluid and efficient, so
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the case, but yeah, I mean, it looked good anyway. So this is kind of your like this is really the Unleash fight where he's actually just killing people because
Oh
like
yeah.
now they're trying to kill him like very seriously, so he's not holding back and he's taking guys out. You know, and we get some. I don't think I heard an actual Wilhelm scream, but there's very Wilhelm-esque screams as people are
Yeah.
dying throughout the scene, which is good fun.
I love the one guy. I think it's the final death. Isn't like they're fighting in the middle of the warehouse or whatever. But as far as I could tell, Bruce kills him with just a punch to the chest. Like there's no knives, there's nothing else. He just punches him in the chest and he's dead. So it kind of shows the, forgive the term, fist of fury that he's got going on there.
That's the next movie, David.
Actually, Peter, asterisk, apparently at some point this movie, when it was released, it did get put under the title of Fists of Fury with an S on the end, causing massive confusion for everybody for years.
That's just annoying.
Yeah.
Why would you do that?
I don't know.
Ah, jeez. The one day we'll do some Jackie Chan and we'll get into the whole Operation Condor and Fury of the Gods confusion.
Also, there was a Jackie Chan movie called New Fist of Fury.
At least that's a completely separate movie though. So it's,
Oh yeah.
yeah. But there's like two Bruce Lee movies where the only difference in the titles is like, yeah.
Yes. That's Alien and Aliens. They just did it first.
Well, yeah, but then go back to the first one and rename that. That's way more confusing.
Yeah, that's fair.
Anyway, so yeah, while this is happening, it's also when the bad guy's son like kidnaps Chow Mei with all of his goons, and not only that, the rest of his goons go into the house where whoever's like left of this group of guys is sleeping and just kill them in their sleep. And it's when Bruce Lee stumbles back to the house after because he is like as much as he won quite hands down, he is still a little tired. He still it took a lot of energy to do that fight.
I mean, if we're going in video game terms, like he didn't lose a life, but he needs a few potions pretty damn quick.
So he stumbles back home only to find just dead bodies, and it's probably the darkest scene in the whole movie because it just feels like.
This is the part where I'm saying it feels like an actual like shock twist because I didn't expect all of the family to be killed, especially, and this is the part that got me the most, was he turns the corner and that young boy selling the rice cakes
the kid's
has like an axe in his back, and even Bruce like recoils. Everyone else he takes it on the chin, but that one he's like, oh god, not little Timmy.
But Chow Mei's nowhere to be found, and that's because and he doesn't know that right now, of course. If I have a critique here about the storytelling and just being consistent, because as much as like some of the fighting's a little cheesy and some of the lines are definitely cheesy, it's all kind of in the same tone, and you can kind of get into it and appreciate it on its own merits. All of a sudden, at this point in the movie, you hear his narration, like his inner thoughts start playing as he's thinking about what to do, and that just kind of felt like, oh, okay, it felt like you didn't know how to advance to our next plot beat, so you're just having to let us hear what he's thinking. Otherwise,
I feel like what this scene needed was for them to keep the uncle in the story and have him survive that night, however, and then just is talking to him.
Yeah, or just come back. I'll just come back at this point because he heard that he's, like the cousin was missing, so he got on a boat and he's here now. I think that could work. Also,
I love how the part that he's saying, at least in the dub here, is, what am I supposed to do? Like, I want to take care of this. I want to avenge my cousins, but somebody's got to take care of my mom. Like, she's elderly. What am I supposed to do there? I'm like, bro, you're not taking care of your mom now. Whoever's doing it now, that's the person that'll keep... I don't understand what the problem here is.
I assume he's sending her money from his job. I assume that's what
that makes sense. That's fair.
But... so yeah, I mean, but it's obviously the big kind of final hurrah of the action movie where he just storms the bad guy's house, right? Goes in, is prepared, and I'm sure this is something that I've seen parodied, but I love the detail here that he's just eating as he walks up, like a badass. He's just it's just a brown bag, but he's eating some crisps, some potato chips for the Americans, just out of this bag, and he's just munching on them, just looking at these henchmen like, I'm about to F you up, and you don't have a chance.
Not only that, but the big boss sends out the henchman to go fight. Meanwhile, he's standing in the doorway holding up a parakeet cage,
That's
like in
right.
one hand. Like both of them are so nonchalant about this fight of one of them eating, the other one's just like, I'm just going to sit here and play with my birds as I watch the fight.
Well, not just that. We defy the laws of physics as I think it's after he's killed the henchman, to be
Yeah.
fair. But the bad guy throws the bird cage up onto the tree, like, and hooks it onto a branch perfectly. But the way it flies up is very much like that's not how physics works. But whatever, it's funny. And then Bruce Lee, in almost a dick move, says, I don't know about that, and like kicks something up. Like a rock or whatever to the cage, breaking the cage so the bad guy's birds are free and just fly away. And the bad guy's like, "Oh, you just did not do that. You just did not free my birds."
You can kill my son and all of the henchmen, but my birds?
If I have a critique here about the final fight and the stakes, is that I do think that at some point before he wins, Bruce Lee should find out that Chow Mei's been kidnapped by the bad guys and knows that she's there to save. Because he doesn't find out about her until after the fight's over and she runs up. Because she gets helped by the other woman who's working there who helps her, which is a nice little moment for her, don't get me wrong. But,
Yeah.
you know,
I'm gonna argue that point. I think it's a lot stronger when he is 100% avenging the deaths of them. I think
You
the
think?
fact that he thinks that she's dead means that he can go all out and like, because you see at the final moments as we skip ahead in the fight
I can
here,
see your
final
argument.
moments, like he is really pounding into him, and it's only her coming up saying stop that pulls him back out of it.
I can see the argument. It's really just because I expected it to be like a stakes thing for him. It's like I guess I was expecting one final motivator for him to make the risky move of just storming the castle, as it were, because there's someone to save, so it's worth doing. But I do also appreciate that it's kind of interesting that it's purely about vengeance. He's not really being like an outright hero here. He's doing this for a lot of, like, you know, personal demons reasons.
Yeah, that's what that Riverside debate scene was, where he's talking about, oh, but who's going to care about my mother? Like, he knows going into this, he's going to die. If it were a rescue mission, if it were a thing of going to save Chow Mein, obviously he would still need to live to be able to get her out. But he's going into this saying, I'm willing to die to avenge the deaths of my entire family.
Yeah. So yes, so I did laugh at the breaking of the bird cage just to basically be a little shit to the
Just to
villain.
spite him.
Yeah. But of course, you know, he jumps around. Some of the bad guys do. You know, he gets slashed a little bit here, but not too badly until the main bad guy steps down, and they have a bit of a face off, and we get the fight, of course. And it's a lot of fun. It's, you know, it's them swiping whatever. At one point, the big boss has like a blade in both hands, so Bruce Lee's really having to dodge and pull some moves to try and not get stabbed or slashed. And he does get slashed at least once across the stomach. That he takes in his stride. He just sort of like looks down at it like, "Oh, did you just do that? Did you just slash me?" Oh,
Yeah, no, this fight has a great push and pull in that every once in a while you feel like Bruce is coming up, and then the bad guy will, like you said, he pulls out a knife or something, and it puts him on the back foot. He gets slashed a few times, and then he gets there's, I think at one point his shirt gets slashed off, and they do a great bit of using that to like wrap up the guy's arms and get one of the knives kicked away. So that way it's, again, evening the battlefield.
Yeah.
He gets on the front foot some more. It's a great push and pull here.
there's also the sort of classic is if you ever watch wrestling, it's the moment where the wrestler will pull down the straps. It's like Bruce Lee's shirt's half hanging off, and he just rips the sleeve that's left off so that he's completely topless and ready for the rest of the fight.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, again, the one point where I think editing wise, there are some really, really strong moments in this fight, but there's also a couple that just pull me out of it a little. Right towards the end of the fight, you get this leg grapple thing where their legs are intertwined and they're just kind of like rolling each other for a little bit. And it cuts back to that like 2 or 3 times of like legs intertwined. Both characters look at it, roll. Legs intertwined. Both characters look at it, roll. And each time between those shots, it felt like it wasn't quite lining up right. I don't know how better to describe it than just there's an extra couple frames that just ruin the flow and like the actual geography of the fight pacing. So it's little moments like that that in this fight scene make me a bit disappointed it wasn't stronger edited, but the rest of it is so solid that it kind of just makes up for it.
Yeah, and I do like the final thing where the villain gets stabbed, but then Bruce Lee does like a sort of tiger claw thing where he gets both of his claws like into his like sternum, and like so almost like he's like grabbing his organs almost and like squeezing them.
Let's be clear. He's grabbing the bag of paint that's underneath this guy's shirt.
And having it squirt out. Yes, quite right.
Yep.
But of course, even though the villain's basically dead at this point, because I mean, I think he's not even just basically dead. I think he is dead at this point. When he goes down, Bruce Lee just starts punching him in the face, and he gets a good half dozen punches in before he gets tired and stops. And I really did appreciate, like, no, the hero's pissed here. Like, he is angry. This is like a moment of anger. And, you know, it's at the end of the movie here where Chow Mei shows up with the police and runs over and sort of pulls, like, I mean, at first Bruce Lee's kind of ready to fight the cops, and then like she's like, hey, don't resist them.
Give up.
It's over. It's fine. And he sort of puts his hands up as if like, okay, you can take me. And the movie ends with him being carted away with the police, and she's by his side, but it's not like, oh, he's getting like a hero's welcome where, oh, you took down the big bad guy, we'll cherish you. It does kind of feel like, oh no, you may actually face some consequences for all the things you've done. Like you starting off this movie being told that you made a vow not to fight, and then the movie ending with, okay, we the audience were rooting for you and all your fighting because it was for like a just cause and there was bad guys to take down, but there is clearly an anger here, and like there has to be some sort of consequence that you, in some way you were trying to, there's a reason why you were trying to avoid this in general in the first place. And I think this is like the ultimate consequence, other than death.
Yeah, I think it's got some cool. Here's the thing. I went back and rewatched just this like final fight scene in the sub version as well, just to see, like, I didn't think there was any dialogue differences, obviously, because they just grunt a bunch as they're punching each other. But I wanted to see specifically the music, and this is the point where I feel like this makes the music better in the original than it is in the dub. Like, as much as I did like the musical style they were going for in the dubbed version, during this ending scene where he's putting his hands up and, like, you know, doing whatever, it goes from this very brassy score of, like, basically the fight scene music that we've had this whole time to this more lighthearted romantic theme while Chow Mei runs up and tells him, you know, give up. Oh, I'm so sorry you went through this. And then it goes back to the brassy score again as he walks out. Whereas the original version has this, best way I could describe it is like almost a noir sort of sound to it, like a very morose sort of horn single trumpet playing out to it. And it's not triumphant. It's not something where it feels like you just watched a badass kung fu movie. It feels like, yeah, these are the consequences. He's being led away here. And I think that's probably emblematic throughout the entire movie, where the score is just better integrated to establish the mood. And I think it makes it feel less kitschy. It makes it feel a lot more earnest in what it's trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, I still got the point at the end, though, to be fair to it. It's not like it was lost on me. Like, I got the somberness of the ending, which I wasn't expecting. I was expecting, especially given how happy a lot of the first half of the movie was with all the characters, I was expecting just a clean, happy ending, but it gave me something a little bit more nuanced than that, which is kind of nice. So
yeah, for sure.
I can't really complain in that case. It's definitely, I think, a fun movie. It does feel like kind of a simple beginnings in some ways, but you know, it's not like it does anything super spectacular or anything like that. But I think it does sell on Bruce Lee being kind of a leading man, which I guess is kind of the point in many ways.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I had a good time. I have no regrets watching this.
For sure. I was a little hesitant going into this season because at least with other seasons, like, you know, 70s Disaster Season, we've done a bunch of, and even if I didn't have exposure to that beforehand, I at least knew like exactly what I was getting out of the movie. But when it's specifically an actor focused movie, like, he could be in anything, you know, this could, for all I knew going into this could have been a romantic comedy, but I recognize I should expect kung fu.
I mean, I think for most actors, you're probably right. I feel like with an actor like Bruce Lee, or if we ever do, you know, anyone else of this ilk, like a Jackie Chan, a Jet Li, whoever, I feel like you're probably, it's safe assuming some kind of action movie for all of them.
Probably. But still, my only thing was vague memories of Enter the Dragon. And so I didn't know if it was just going to be that same, like, really over the top, like, kung fu tournament style with, like, borderline mysticism throughout. This being as down to earth as it was, even when it did get a little bit more over the top with it, I was pleasantly surprised with it. I thought that it did a great job of tackling what it wanted to talk about here in a way that, while still being an over-the-top boss fight at the end, still felt like it was trying to do some sort of credit to the story overall.
Yeah, and the earnestness and the cheesiness of some elements remind me a lot of reading older comic books. It reminds me of reading a Silver Age comic book and the way the characters speak in those. That's the sort of vibe that I was getting from the dialogue in this at times. So, all right, well, we're starting a new extra bit of rating system here.
Yes.
We started this on Ace, that we already recorded, but to explain here for Collector's Cut, the start of a new season, it's not that complicated. We're just going to be rating a few extra categories, as well as the overall rating at the end. So I'll explain those in a second, but we'll do the usual couple of questions first. David, what was your scene of the movie?
Scene of the movie. I think, for me, the scene of the movie is going to be... It's going to be the sequence where the amulet breaks. It's going to be that moment, like, the fight scene leading into it was okay. It was fine. But I think just having that moment where he gets hit, it does the quick zoom in thing, and you just see him unload. Like, that was what the entire first half of the movie really was building up to, of we're going to see him join in on the fight. And it does not disappoint because he is very good at what he does. So I think I'm going to give it to that.
Yeah, I think that's an obvious contender. The cartoon cut out in the walls, an obvious one. I really like when he's shy from the girls. I think what I'm going to pick, though, is kind of I mean, it's kind of a one big scene in a lot of ways, but specifically the start with the henchman before the final fight when he's eating. Particularly the fact that he kicks a couple of guys down and beats them while still holding his bag of food and keeps eating afterwards. Like, just there's something oozing cool about a lot of that I just really like. And he didn't have to come out of the scene eating. I love that the character had to choose to do that to make a point of being like, you don't have a chance. Right? And this is not about ego. This is about me showing you that you do not rule me because you think you can boss everyone around. I am here to be a living example that you cannot. So deal with it.
And let me be clear with my earlier statement. This movie is very good about saying join a union, work with your workers, but do be aware your bosses will try to murder you and put you in a block of ice.
Yes. So come with the full fist of fury, basically. Yes. So yeah, I'm going with that. All right. What is your? I mean,
I was going to say, is this even a question?
Yeah. Do you know what? I will be impressed if we get to the end of this season and a single one of these movies where Bruce Lee is not the MVP. Because I think he's obviously the MVP of this.
In this, definitely. I mean, I will say, when you get to, like, Enter the Dragon and stuff, there is a little bit more of an ensemble there.
Yeah,
so
there's a couple of cool supporting characters in that. And there's always a chance that a villain might stand out as well. Yeah. But I think in this one, it's clearly Bruce Lee.
Yeah, there's no way to say it. I mean, I will say during the first half, I thought there was going to be a fair shake for the cousin, for Tien, but because he is dead by the 30-minute mark.
See, David. He gets fridged.
He does.
He literally gets fridged.
Yeah. He exists solely to bring the main character joy and then to take it away.
And put an ice.
Box of ice. Yep.
He gets fridged. Wow. All right. So the new ratings that we're doing here, which you'll quickly get used to, is we're going to rate out of 10 5 categories as well as our overall rating. Now, the overall rating does not have to be an average of the other ratings or anything like that. It can still be open to how we want to interpret it. But David and myself are going to rate the visuals, the audio, the acting, the story/script, and the production value. And the production value can include special effects, visual effects, or just general sort of scope of, like, you know, big shooting locations, things like that. Anything that makes it feel like money's been pumped into it. Now, admittedly, some movies might not be applicable for that, depending on what type of movie it is. But visuals, is what it sounds like. We're talking about cinematography, we're talking about color palettes, we're talking about editing, all that good stuff. Audio's music plus sound effects, sound mixing. So pretty straightforward.
As Pete basically described this section to me, it's if the movie sucks in a lot of ways, you could still give a little shining light to something that stood out.
Yeah. So I think this is an interesting one to do this on, actually, starting with this season. So now, rather than bounce back and forth, I think, at least this is the way we did it in the Ace. Maybe we'll change our minds on this later, but I think for the sake of right now, what we want to do is David will just go through his entire set of ratings and end with his final rating. So on you go.
All right. So visuals, cinematography, I think is good. I don't think it really does anything that's too stand out. Every once in a while, the zoom ins work really well, but I do have to dock a few points for where I do think the editing is a little bit shaky and takes me out of the fight scenes. So overall, I think I'm going to come down at like 6.5 for visuals.
Okay. Yeah.
Sound is really hard for this one because how much do I attribute to the dub versus how much do I attribute in general?
I think you have to go with the version you watched all of, basically.
Yeah. In which case, it's lacking. As much as I enjoy the musical tracks they chose, I think kind of in that same scope of editing, the way that they come in and fade out is very distracting for me. There's plenty of points where it just did not fit the tone that was going on at all. So that one, I'd still give it above the middle mark, but it's still just like a single 6 for me.
Okay.
Acting, I think acting worked. I don't think there's anybody who really failed their role in acting. I think it really works out for me. So all in all, that one's going to get a pretty respectable, I'd say 7. I'll just go 7. I was debating the 0.5, but I'm going to go with just a flat 7. I will say, I mentioned this on Ace as well. The first 5 episodes of this, so basically a whole Bruce Lee season, these ratings do not count because I'm still figuring out my scale.
They count. No, you're going to be held accountable for every number you give here.
Yeah.
Take it seriously.
Pete was surprised when I added extra columns to the spreadsheet to keep track of these numbers. He's like, why? Who cares? Screenplay. I think that the screenplay is a solid concept. I do think that the pacing in the middle kind of drags a little bit, but ultimately it does still work out for the kind of kung fu movie it's going for, and the kitschiness of it and the humor especially works as well. So that one I am also going to give a respectable 7. And then production value. If we're talking the production value for this one, probably mostly being the kung fu fights, because I think that's mostly where that would lay in. I think this one is very solid. It may not have as much like deep choreography as I would like, but I think the final fight scene more than makes that up. So I'm going to give this one a 7.5. And then overall rating, I enjoyed it. I think, like I said, there's a few little flaws to it, so it's not quite in that great territory for me. But overall, I'd say that it still comes down to be probably a solid 7.
Okay. Yeah, so visuals-wise for me, I think it's an interesting one because I do enjoy the zoom ins to the faces, the little moments of like, will he jump in here, that kind of thing. But it's not like a super interesting set of locales. It's not like there's tons of like really fancy cinematography that really caught me off guard. So I think like a 6. Like it looks like a movie. I'm happy enough with it, but it's not like blowing me away for sure. Sound is again a little interesting to me because I did kind of enjoy the cheesiness of it jumping around the various music and kind of the upbeat nature of it. So I'm actually going to be weird and rate the sound a bit higher than the visuals, and I think I'll go with a 7 on that. The acting is kind of weird for me to talk about as well, because I do think in general there's kind of like a everyone's happy kind of feel to it, and it works well enough for what it is. But I think where I'm really going to give points to this here, and I think I would include this in acting, is just the sheer star power of Bruce Lee and the presence that he always has. You're always excited for when he's finally going to get into the fight, when he's finally going to care. You care about him when he's being shy with the women and it's kind of cute and adorable or whatever. He carries it so well that I feel like I have to go up here. I think his star power raises it to about an 8. Now, I'm not saying obviously everyone in the movie is up to that level, but I think he significantly uplifts it. with his presence.
Okay.
Script story is, and this kind of includes characters as well. Anything that kind of comes from the script. I would say it's okay. Like, I think it keeps it simple. I think where its strengths lie, or when it does, get a little darker than you expect versus the rest of the movie, or the more nuanced ending that it's not just the good guy wins, let's all be happy, which is what I think you'd expect based on the first half of it, because that's kind of the tone that it's giving you. So I'll give it some points for that. But I probably wouldn't go above, say, a 6.5, just because it is pretty straightforward, and it's not like the villain's unlikable, but they don't make me hate him. They don't make me kind of like, oh, I need to see this guy get his head ripped off. He never gets to that level or anything like that. So, yeah. And as much as I said I really enjoyed them forgetting why they were angry for a couple of scenes whilst Bruce Lee was promoted, it is kind of a weird thing in the script. So it amused me, but I don't know if it's necessarily objectively good. So I'll say 6.5 for the script. And then production value. This is a strange one as well, because it's not like there's a lot of great locations necessarily. They basically keep going back to the house, the bad guy's mansion, and like the factory set, and then a couple of streets, and there's not much more beyond that. Fight scene wise, we've joked about the really fake blood, right? So it's not like it feels that there's, at least from a modern perspective, a lot there. They're very energetic, but I think the energy comes down more from the performances, or indeed the stunt work, I guess maybe is a better way of putting that. I guess stunt work kind of counts for production value.
At least for this one, I would say
so. I don't know. I feel like this is also going to be more of a 6 out of 10 for production value for me. Not bad, but certainly nothing's blowing me away and making me feel... But that's not inherently a terrible thing, though. Like, that maybe even adds to some of the charm in this case for what it is. But for overall score, I'm actually going to agree with your final score, and that's a 7. I think it's good. I think, obviously, Bruce Lee's presence, his charisma carries a lot of it. I think it's charming and endearing at points. It does a couple of interesting turns towards the end. The story never becomes something super exceptional or unpredictable, but it does make it a bit more interesting by the time you get to the final credit where it says the end. So, I'll say 7 out of 10. I think this is a pretty solid start for Bruce Lee season, I think. And I'm hoping that, with the exception of Game of Death, which is meant to be bad, but it's notable because it's the one that he died while they were making it. So, we have to have that be the final chapter. I suspect, or at least hope, that the rest of the ones we watch, other than that, are all going to be better than this. But if that turns out to be true, then I think we're in, a happy place.
Yeah, so absolutely. So, in terms of making the collection, making the cut.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, it's at least cutting it close, right? It's not definitely no lower than that.
Yeah,
but does it make the cut? That's 7's kind of on that cusp of like, it's good, but I wouldn't say it's a must-have. So I'm kind of tempted to say it's cutting it close. It's the sort of thing where if you're doing if you want to collect the important Bruce Lee movies, obviously get it. But if we're sticking to sort of the mantra of what this scale's supposed to be, I would say this is cutting it close.
I'd agree. I think also throwing in the idea that it is foreign language first and then dubbed afterwards, while there is a certain charm to that, also does kind of dock it a little bit from the idea of being just a general audience appreciation as well. So, yeah, I'd agree with the cutting it close, but it's very good within that cutting it close.
Yeah. I'm definitely happy I watched it, and I'm excited to see, I think Fist of Fury's what we've got coming next. So, we'll see how the next one shapes up next week. And this is, I mean, to be fair, so was Airport. Other than the first Airport, I hadn't seen the rest of them, so that was mostly like new stuff for me. But this is likewise is mostly a new journey of discovery, other than Enter the Dragon, which most of us have probably seen before. So I'm excited to see what we got coming next. But look forward to that next week. And of course, check out the Atomic Cinema Experiment, our science fiction movie podcast, where this week we did Megalopolis. Okay.
God, I have blanked that from my memory already.
But we've recently done more interesting films at Back to the Future 3, and we've got a whole back catalogue now. Go check out that sci-fi podcast. If you want to get even more content from us, we do 2 bonus monthly shows over on Patreon, where you can support all the content we do and help keep it coming. We do a monthly show called The Criterion Cut, where we review movies from the Criterion Collection. And then we do a movie show called Extra Reels, where we review some of the worst things ever made. For example, just last week, according to the schedule, we put out a review of Postal by Uwe Boll.
Yep.
And we've done Neil Breen, we've done all sorts. We mentioned Miami Connection during this review, which I believe is the very first episode we ever did of Extra Reels. Yep. So, yeah, whole catalogue. There's a good... must be getting close to 30 episodes of that by now.
Oh, yeah. No, I think we're right up against it. Let me check. Postal is number 27, if you count the free episode of Solar Crisis on YouTube.
Yeah, I would. I do have an idea, actually, when we hit 32. For
the people like out in television land here, before we started recording, I had like a 5-minute long thing with Pete about how far in advance we've planned these extra reels. And now he's throwing at me like, oh, hey, here's another one I've got for 32. Stop.
Well, no, hold on. Like, you would like to know, David, this would be like an extra special thing. It wouldn't be a movie to review.
All right, well, because what I know about the number 32, I have an inkling as to what it is, but I will let that sit as a surprise.
Okay. I'm going to ask you when we're done to see if you're right.
All right.
Anyway, but yes, thank you very much for joining us, everyone. Go check out the bonus shows, and if you're... Actually, by the time this goes out, Streams should be back, but like I'm still waiting on Tim moving back into his house. For us, why Streams has not been on at the time of recording. But blame the fires in California. But Streams will be back as soon as it possibly can, if it's not already. But that is us, so thank you very much for joining. We do appreciate it. Keep watching movies, and if you can get it, it's always nice to have diplomatic immunity.